Hi from Geneva, Switzerland. And Carolyn who says hi from Massachusetts, the US. We have Joe saying hello from
Good.
County Clare, Ireland. And we have Anna from Iceland, Tamra from Maryland, and Siska from Indonesia. We have
Oh,
Yves or Ive from hi from Italy. We have Patricio, good morning from Matanzas, Chile. We have Reine from in Spain, says hello to all. Hello, all. Dina says hello. Sandra says hi from now sunny Bucks. Marcia says, or Marcia, hello from Michigan, the USA. We have also Max from Valencia, Spain. Michelle from Canada. Ina from Germany. Looking forward to a nice demonstration. So am I. We have Margaret saying, wow, how amazing to see names from all around the world. I agree. Brilliant. I absolutely agree. It's beautiful that we get to connect. We have greetings from Slovakia, from Carol. Isabel says, greetings from hot and sunny Galicia, Spain. We have hellos from Istanbul, from Jada. So excited. Ooh. She writes, I am excited about this workshop as I find the style of Ian McManus something that I aspire for. And Ludwig says, good afternoon from Antwerp, Belgium. We have more hellos from Iceland, Tennessee, Stratford, Argentina, España, Malaysia, Oxfordshire, Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, Dijon, France, Brazil, Czech Republic, Northern Michigan, another person from Czech Republic, Netherlands, Minnesota, and it goes on, and I get so happy. We have hellos from Lahore, Pakistan, from Hungary, from different parts of South America, North America, Europe, and as we already know, from Asia. And yeah, it's so beautiful. Uh,
wonderful. Yeah.
yeah, and there are so many hellos. We have hellos from Colombia, etc., etc. Beautiful. Thank you so much for writing your hellos in the chat. I can't keep talking about those because it takes so much time, but it is so beautiful that you write and that we get to see all of these names. And also, my name is Hanna. I sit in Sweden, and I am welcoming Ian McManus. And where are you tuning in from, Ian?
I'm in Milton Keynes in Bedfordshire, UK. So it must
Wonderful.
be here. Yeah, yeah. Welcome
And
everybody. Nice to meet
we are
you. Nice to
super excited for this workshop because, as most of you probably know, we will talk about and focus on a topic that can feel so overwhelming and challenging and complex. We're gonna have a workshop with Ian where he shows us how to use watercolor with 3 marks structure. And this is actually not 3 marks in the meaning of pencil marks, but 3 steps or 3 different aspects and focus things to focus on, which is structure, focus, and atmosphere. And we're gonna do this not on any subject whatsoever, but we're gonna focus in on cityscapes. And I'm gonna ask you, Ian, how come you have chosen this specific topic for this workshop? And is this for any level, or is this just for the very, very advanced watercolor artist, would you say?
well, personally, I don't like to discriminate against beginners or intermediate advanced. I think um, I'm quite happy to teach beginners as well as advanced painters, or help them along the way. Um, I think the reason I chose this subject is because in all the workshops that I do, um, it's the kind of subject that rarely people will tackle because it's difficult to eliminate all the complexity within it. And I've often found if I hand a photograph out or an image out to a group in a workshop, most of them will be terrified by it simply because for some reason mentally I think a lot of people look at a complex street scene and they just see too much because they're obviously absolutely rammed with windows, street lights, cars, people, and just too many elements within it. But as an artist, when I look at subjects like this, all I see is big shapes, and I'm able somehow mentally to focus on the shapes more than the complexity. And I'm also aware that people struggle with painting things like figures, or cars. You know, it's the most common thing I ever hear in a workshop is, oh, I can't paint cars, I can't paint figures, or I can't do buildings. Actually, I like to convince people you actually can. You're not actually painting. Because I always think you're not. You know, painting is an illusion to me. It's an illusion. You're not painting the figure. You're not painting the car. You're painting the shape that will actually look like that, which is sometimes a very hard thing to get your mind set into. But it's amazing how few brushstrokes you need to depict something like a figure. The key thing with anything like a figure, a car, a horse, is proportion. So if it's proportionally correct, i.e. the head's the right size relative to the body, or the legs are long enough relative to the body, then you don't need too many miles to convince a viewer that it is a figure. And I think that it's always nice. The reason I paint the way I do, it always appealed to me to allow, some way, and I don't think I did this consciously, but when I was looking at artwork when I first began painting about 30 years ago, overly detailed work, I admired the technical skill of it, but it didn't really appeal to me. I was always drawn to representational artwork where I felt as a viewer to that artwork, I could get more involved in it. So I would be searching around the image, trying to, work it all out. What was the artist telling me here? If they're overly detailed, and one of the things students tend to do, I find a lot, is they want to put too much in, add too many brushstrokes, too many marks. And if people could just learn to stop, on certain parts of the painting, we're going to learn a bit of this in the workshop that I'm going to be doing, but just do enough to leave the viewer in a position where they can work it out. It's like, for example, to explain it better, if I paint a boatyard and there's like 50 boats sitting in a boatyard, I think you don't need to paint 50 boats. You can paint 2 and then do 50 masts and a load of just abstract marks for the boats. And that way, the viewer can look at the 2 boats you may have painted in a little bit more detail, and the abstract marks, they can then work out, well, it's a boatyard, because somehow mentally you see all these upright masts, 2 boats that you can read as boats, and your mind will just convert the rest to a busy boatyard. Yeah. And this is similar to like a street. You don't need endless amounts of windows or endless amounts of detail in it. A little bit in a sort of certain area where you're putting your emphasis, well, the viewer can convert the rest of the stuff you've abstracted out a little bit. They will convert that to a street, a busy street. So it's just as simple as that, really.
As simple as that. So thank you so much for that introduction to your approach, your way of thinking, your way of simplifying complex subjects by seeing what's most important and getting those things in the right place, and then leaving the rest for the imagination of the viewer. That is a skill that is different from learning how to copy a reference photo. And when we discussed before we started this workshop, I could really sense that Ian is a translator of the reference photo. So there is a translation process happening, and that's what we're gonna take a look at today, what that translation process looks like for Ian, and he's gonna be the translator of that approach to us so that we get a hang of how to approach a complex scene without getting stuck in too many different strokes or details. So thank you so much for that introduction, Ian. And let me just have a brief overview what of what lies ahead logistically. This workshop will last for about 2 hours. There are moderators in the chat, so if you have any questions, you can ask them there. I will make my best to take a look at the questions. We will answer some of them along the workshop, and we also have a dedicated Q&A session at the very end of the workshop. And if this is your first time with us, you can, of course, try to keep up with Ian and paint along, but just be prepared that it's very tricky to keep up in the pace of a professional artist who is teaching at his own pace, because, of course, we want him to be able to finish the piece in this amount of time. So just know that you also have access for a bit afterwards, so you can watch this afterwards and do it in your own pace. So don't feel like you need to be able to paint this right now in order for you to feel like you have the skills to paint it at another point in time. And now you've already shared, so many of you, where you are from, and we would love to know if you are one of our returning people who have been with Artefacto for a long time, or if you're new, so we can welcome you. So if you are new, you can put an N in the chat, and O if you've been with us for a while, and I will welcome you in just a bit. And just speaking of the things that Ian has mentioned already, let's just take a look at some of the challenges that we might have encountered. The first one, you can also write the number in the chat of the one that you feel most aligned with, the one that you resonate the most. Number 1, freeze when facing complex scene. You see a street full of cars, buildings, figures, you don't even know where to start. And if you start, it doesn't really feel like you know how to approach it. Or perhaps you don't even start at all. Or 2, if you decide to do it, to go through with it all of the way, you might feel that you overwork your painting because you really tried to get it right. And in the end, it feels stiff instead of vibrant and alive. Or 3, struggle with making your painting readable. Your image might have the color, but it might lack the clarity or a strong focal point. So it feels like it is a painting, but it doesn't really invite the viewer in to spend that quality time with the painting. Or 4, get confused by perspective and proportions. Everyone has been there. You tried drawing a car or a building, but it ends up looking off and like it's a bit askew. Or number 5, you focus so much on color that the tonal values don't really match what you would need for that painting to feel like a finished piece. So first and foremost, I want to welcome lots and lots and lots of you back. I see so many O's here, so many O's in the chat, so many O's. Welcome back. And for the first time, Ive or Ivy, perhaps. Welcome back, John, Joe, hi, Ivana, Marcia, and welcome, Daniel. We have welcome back to Ludwig, Marie, France, and we have welcome to Joanne and Johanna and Carolyn and Margaret and Martin. Beautiful. And then lots of welcome backs. Lots of welcome backs and lots of welcomes to those of you who are here for the first time. It's beautiful to have you all here with us. We have lots of people writing 1, 2, 4, 2, 5, 1, 2, 4, 2, 2, and 3 and 5. So yes, we have all of the numbers represented here. Ian, is this something that you recognize both in yourself and in your students? You can just keep it brief. Is this something you've experienced?
Yes, very much so. Yeah.
Wonderful. So we know that it's not just a phase that you jumped over.
No, not at all. Yeah. So.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. So yeah, good to know that you also have some human tendencies. And then before we start jumping into the actual workshop, let's also share that today Ian will introduce how to simplify complex subjects in watercolor painting. You will learn Ian McManus' personal method to turn visual overload into bold tonal compositions with clarity and focus. We will also be introducing a brand new course that Ian has created exclusively at Artefacto. And Ian does not have tons of online courses out in the world, this is a very, very unique experience that we are having right now, where he teaches us live and that he has also created a course from Artefacto. We feel super honored that he has chosen to do that for us. We also have the Q&A session at the end of the session to look forward to. So now you might be here feeling, I'm super excited to start painting, but who am I gonna paint with? So let me introduce our instructor, Ian McManus. He's a widely recognized professional watercolorist celebrated for his vibrant atmospheric street scenes and diverse subjects ranging from coastal views to interior studies. And his dynamic brushstrokes as brushwork and plein air approach reflect a deep connection to impressionistic tradition, capturing light, energy, and narrative in each composition. He is a member of the IEA, Institute of East Anglian, yes, artists.
Yeah.
Ian has exhibited widely and earned awards, including the Ruth Hill Memorial Award, and his solo exhibitions at the Gallery Hall have become a hallmark of his evolving success under the ongoing series, A Watercolor Diary. And beyond painting, Ian is a passionate educator known for his fast-paced, inspiring demonstrations and workshops held across the UK and internationally, including in China. And Ian believes that with the right guidance and dedication, anyone can learn to paint, a philosophy he brings to every class, helping artists unlock their potential and express themselves with confidence. And here are some of your artworks. And you shared with me previously, Ian, that if you had followed the advice that you got, you would not be painting today, but you chose to do something completely different to that advice. And that has led you on this journey of exploring your voice as a watercolor artist. Could you share a little bit about that specific process and how that has shaped you as an artist?
My journey in watercolor began, I would say, 30 plus years ago, and I was in a obviously I was in an educational facility class, and I think when I'm often asked, when I began painting, I didn't know what I wanted to achieve as a painter or an artist, if you will. I just knew what I didn't want to do, and I never wanted my paintings to look like photographs. I would have been very sort of upset if anyone had ever said to me, it looks like a photograph. I would have been, I don't know why, but I just would have been. So when I began, and I literally picked up a paintbrush, a watercolor. Once I discovered watercolor, I just picked up the brush, and I just, from somewhere within, instinctively just started putting down sort of abstract shapes that sort of depicted something. The tutor at the time who I had was a bit more traditional sort of artist, who literally said to me after 3 or 4 weeks of doing this sort of stuff, looked at what I was doing and said to me, I don't think this is for you. And I said, why? He said, well, I just don't think it's for you. And I said to him, well, I like it. And I've often recounted that story because I think it's very important that it reflects what you should be thinking about as an artist, really, that, you've got to paint what makes you happy. To some degree, it's irrelevant what anybody looking at your work says about it. You've got to be happy with it. You've got to paint what makes you happy. And over the years, I've just understood what technically makes paintings work. And I'm I'm often surprised to find when I carry out workshops or tutorials for people that they may have been painting for years, but don't understand what it is that an artist would do to take the work from that step to the next step, and I like to introduce people to those steps, the things that they can change about what they are doing in order to all of a sudden their work starts to improve by good edge control, define focal points, trying not to, and I spoke about this at the beginning there, that I'm not big on color really. I always stress to people tone is key, so I'm rambling a little bit. If I've gone off track a little bit, I hope I've gone off track a little bit there, but
let's just we so what I think is so fascinating and important here is that you did absolutely not follow the advice to stop painting because it's probably not for you. Instead, you realize that when you listen to what you love and what you want, then you will have the capacity of figuring that out. And I think that kind of empowerment is necessary if we want to face something that we still haven't grasped. And a subject such as this that we're going to do today requires some faith from us. It requires us to be willing to not create beautiful paintings in the beginning so that we train the muscles, the understanding required to start figuring it out. Because probably the paintings that you did back then, when you got those comments, are most likely not at the level where you are now, where you are, and when you have gained this reputation around the world as this watercolor master. Of course, there was steps in between that you had to take, guided by the vision and your longing and the things that fueled you as an artist. I think it's very important to see that you also had to take the steps that we are going to explore today.
I think if I had any advice for any painter, anybody trying to progress in their artwork, common things I see. Fear of failure is the biggest one. People paint timid, and with watercolor, I think it's very, very easy because it's a bit of a, sort of a one-hit wonder. It's unlike oil or acrylic where you can adjust and paint over. Because watercolor is very easy, it'll start unraveling, it'll start going wrong very quickly. So it's a tendency for people to paint timid. And I think it's easy to say and very difficult to do, but you've got to lose the fear a little bit. If it goes wrong, there's another bit of paper somewhere. Go and get another bit of paper, turn it over, and do it again on the other side. And I mean, I think I was never frightened to ruin something, if that makes sense. So if I was painting something and I wasn't happy with the way it was going, I wasn't afraid to throw some dark paint on it somewhere. I was never, and I think a lot of people, when they're painting, particularly in watercolor, they stop too soon. They're painting, and I think, I don't want to do it anymore because I'll ruin it. It gets to a point where, they like what they've done, they don't want to do any more. And I look at it and I think you need another 5 or 10 minutes on there, and you'll take that to a new level. So it's, and I think, if I had any advice for any watercolorist who's looking to advance their work, you're going to need to ruin a few pictures. You're going to need to throw dark shadows somewhere. And if it doesn't work, you'll have learned something. And that's how you go from, sort of that step to that next step. You find courage, and some of this work you're looking at here is just born out of 30 years of not being afraid to fail with them. You get to a point where you think, well, I've done that 50 times before, and it, by pushing it, it works.
Thank you so much for those inspiring words. And I think when it comes to subjects that we are not yet familiar with, we kind of need a bit of that attitude to get all the way to the side of that hurdle where we can actually be proud of the paintings and also feel at ease while we're painting, because now you can paint this in an easeful way. And the people who are here today might feel, I don't get it. And probably you didn't get it at the first try, but you had these years of exploring. So thank you so much for sharing your journey. We have some feedback from Ian's students here. First from Joe, writing, Ian is a fun, informative, and encouraging teacher. His way of painting step by step, giving you confidence to paint in a loose, sophisticated style. Love his work. Love the fact that I'm learning to paint so much better since attending his fantastic workshops. And Lee is writing, Ian's demonstration have been invaluable in loosening up my technique. He has a great ability to break down landscape photographs into simplified overall form, color, and tone, which I found very helpful. Highly recommend. And today we're going to learn about how to break down cityscapes into simplified form, color, and tone, which is going to be super useful also for those of us who are here today. And as I mentioned previously, this is an artist you won't find online. So we are super lucky today to have this unique opportunity to learn from Ian and understand his approach and just absorb as much as we can while we're here today. We will also have an limited enrollment. We will open up limited enrollment for Ian's course. And those of you who are here live, while this is still live streamed, you will have the best deal on this course. So this workshop is for those of us who struggle to simplify busy scenes, don't know where to begin, want to learn how to paint more confidently and quickly without overworking your art and without the fear of failing. And if you feel that your painting lacks atmosphere or emotional impact, this can also help you with that. Or if you love watercolor but you feel stuck in the too careful and too tight kind of style and you want to loosen up, or if you want to paint expressive city scenes and you feel overwhelmed by cars, people, and buildings and want to have that guide of how to break it all down into a more step-by-step approach. If you are looking to learn from a top British watercolorist with decades of teaching experience who doesn't usually teach online, this is also perfect for you. And there are lots of other things that I know that Ian will walk us through that I'm super, super excited about. But before I start talking about that, I'm going to ask you, Ian, what are some of those things that really matters in a paintings if we don't want to overwork it? What would you say if you can simplify that in a couple of sentences?
Simplifying.
Do we need to capture everything to capture the essence of a photograph?
No, therein lies the problem. That's what most people do. Too much, add too many details to it. Like it's a complex street scene. You need to look at the image and, from the pencil drawing, decide what it is you're actually painting. I always say that. I mean, I'm just trying to recall what I say in workshops, really. You look at a complex street scene with a photograph, so you look at it, you can't paint the whole thing. It's impossible. You'd be there for a week. So you have to look at it and decide, what am I actually painting here? That's the first thing you need to do in your head. What am I painting? So I'd look at the subject I'm going to be doing today. I look at it, and I find the area within that painting that's the bit I'm painting. And then I can look at the rest of it and say, well, that's the area that just needs to be sort of simplified. So you've got to know where you're going from the start with watercolor, because it's not something you can change halfway through and like you could in oil or acrylic, where you can overpaint things. So it's sort of, you've got to decide what it is you're actually painting within a complex image, and then tone. Obviously, I'm a tone painter more than a colorist, so I would then identify the tone range. Where's the light? Where's the dark? Where's the midtones? And I sometimes have to create a focal point, of which I'm going to explain more about when we start drawing this subject out today. I'm having to create sort of focal area because it's rather devoid of main focal area there. So I'll explain how I actually create a focal point. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And we have a simplified step by step if anyone wants to see that what the advantages of your approach are, is that we simplify what can feel overwhelming, focusing on tone over color, and push you to keep to stop at the right moment and adding the relevant things, and also builds painterly thinking while you're not only copying a photo but creating a painting, just as you said, is super important to you. And this approach is logical and repeatable, which is wonderful. We can learn and then use the system again and again 3 shapes, tonal structure, focal control, finishing touches. And that means that the result of this is that it can transform the sense of complexity into clarity and giving you the tools and confidence to paint with boldness and direction. And that, of course, is our hope, that you start to get a taste of that today. So regardless of where you are today. So if you're ready to start learning from Ian showing us his painting, write yes in the chat. I really want to get started with this. And if you're curious what materials we will be using, here is some information of that. So you can take a photograph of that if you want that for later. And today we will work on this specific reference photo. And if you want to have that on a separate device, you can also take a photograph of this one. You will also find it elsewhere. And now it's time to start practicing. So I'm super excited to get to learn from and with everyone, from you with everyone.
Okay. There we go.
Yes. So I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. And here we go with the first step. You can see the reference image just above me there. And I'll begin with how I actually draw these kind of things. So when I look at a subject like that, if I put it there, you can see I've got another image there. I'll explain how I deal with this. So to me, when I look at that, this is where, you know, a lot of people struggle with this because they see too much complexity. All this area here, this street light here, it's just too much complexity there. So most people would tend to walk away from that. What I hope to demonstrate to you today is a way of dealing with this. So when I look at this as an artist, all I see is 3 big shapes. And they are that area there, which is literally the sky, that would be shape number 1. This building here and all these buildings here, as they come all the way down to the ground area there, that entire area there is just the second shape within the image. And that area there, the road, is the third shape. So it's basically 1, 2, 3 shapes. So the first thing I would do in terms of drawing that is to identify those 3 mass shapes. And the problem I see a lot of in students would be the tendency to begin with small shapes. So you might look at this area down the back here, and I see people will do that. They'll start drawing little shapes like this. That is not going to work because 10 minutes of that, and then people start to rub that image out. So all I would do is, first of all, I tend to work from the ground up. So I would identify the ground area. So to me, the ground area is somewhere across that area there. I'll just hold the image up here so I can see it myself. I've got a second copy there, and across there. All right. That's the ground. Then I'll identify a sort of a mass shape of these buildings where they actually sit. Up there, down there, across there somewhere, and then that goes down there. So that's shape number 1 there, that's shape number 2 there, the buildings, and this is shape number 3, the sky. Yeah. From there, I would then begin to refine that image. Once I'm happy with where I've placed those mass shapes there, you'll notice as well I haven't drawn the curve, which I see some people do, draw a sort of line down there. I don't like to see that. I always like to take the ground area off the edge of the paper. That way it doesn't look like you're climbing uphill for some reason. So prospectively, it looks better if you bring the edge of the picture, the road, off the side of the picture rather than the bottom. As I said, I'll come back to now just refining what I've drawn there. If you can see that, I hope you can see that. I'll do it in sort of slightly darker pencil lines, then you can see it better. So let's refine that image. And the area that I'm interested in refining is the top line, not so much this area here. This is the area we're going to abstract out a little bit. This area up here is going to be the focal area. So I'll just have a look, and I'll just sort of start with the roof there. Has this sort of structure on the top like that. And all I'll do is, I won't put any chimney pots on just yet. Okay. That bit comes down there. It's got that line across there. I won't put any windows in either at this point. We'll just get this main structure sorted out. Across there. Another little line just going down there. Comes out to the end here. That comes down there. another line down there. So we move slightly further over here. Just have a little bit sticking out there. Then we move,
Would
yeah,
it be possible to place the reference photo, so that we get to see
sure.
the top as well?
Hear that? Does that help?
Well, that maybe if you can just place the reference photo down on the sky a little bit. Yes, thank you. That would be super helpful. Thank you.
Fine, yeah. Okay. So then, again, I'll just come over here because this sort of mid-distance down there, there's that A structure there. As I say, it's the top line that will sell it. It's not what goes on here, it's the top line that will sell it. Another structure there. This area here, not so worried about that. That can be grayed out. Now we'll come back to this building up here, and it's got this canopy affairs hotel or something, I feel. So there's a canopy, red canopy structure there. Okay, a couple of verticals coming down off of that. All right, let's come back on the building here. Architectural line across there. Architectural line across there. Okay, that's fine. Right, now, having done that, let's look at this building up here, and I'll put some more definition at the top. Chimney pot there. Another chimney pot here. Tends to be the area I focus on where builders are concerned, that top line, because it's generally the bit people will look at, believe it or not. Okay, there we go. Simple as that. A few chimney pots rolling over here. There's one there, look. Another one there. And here. There is a sort of a pointy thing there. I'm going to just indicate that slightly just in the background. Take some of the linear shape off of it. Okay, now the building here, the big yellow building on the left-hand side, sort of the focal area is going to be in that area there. I'll indicate some of these windows up here. Don't need to do a huge amount with those really. Just place them in. The brush can do the work when it comes to doing it. And there's another one over there. And then here below that, this other one here. Again, there. Another one over there. Down below there. It's amazing, really, isn't it? How little you have to do with a pencil. People get so tied up with architectural detail, but the brush will do the work, really. Up here, another window there. Another window there. Okay, doorway there. Now, having done all that, I'll start to develop what I feel is a good focal point. So here, let's have a look. Front of the hotel here. You can see that area there. Cars. There we go. Screen. It's the important bit on a car is the screen. There. So remember, this area here is probably going to, well, not probably, it will be, hopefully where I want the viewer to settle when we're done this. Car there. The lead-in lines there. And then to get depth in the work and perspectively correct, you'll notice if you look at the reference photograph, I mean, this is the area I have to develop because the main three shapes went in, but that area there, this is where you as an artist would have to create this image because these elements, the cars, the people, they're all going to move. They're not going to stand still. So as an artist now, this is where you come in. You have to find techniques to draw things like cars. I mean, this thing over here, that's fine. If I place that car there, just on the edge there, you know, there. And this is where we as artists come in. None of that, none of the sky's not going anywhere, the buildings are not going anywhere, the road isn't going anywhere, but these elements will. So, and we get a few smaller ones in here. Perspectively, when it comes to doing cars, of course, you're on level ground. so what will remain the same is the roof height. They're like figures, you know, on level ground, eye level, that's eye level. So however far away the cars are from the viewer, the roof height will remain the same. It's the wheels that will come lower. So if you draw a big car here, for example, right in the foreground area there, if you stick a car that's much nearer to us as the viewers, it would be in that area there. So the roof height is similar to these ones, but the side of the car and the wheels will be right here, down the bottom here somewhere, yeah? So that one's nearer, and then we'll get further away, shouldn't by shape size. Now, let's get a figure or two in here. So if I was to put a figure there, as a figure, in a level street like that, you're always going to be about shoulder height with the car. All right, so if I put a figure there, the figures are not overly difficult. People struggle with them, but as we get to paint this, figures in painting are basically head and shoulders, really. Give him a friend. Look here, another one there, just next to him. It's like that. Over here, head heights, they're like car roofs. Head heights on level ground, eye level will remain the same. If I put another figure here, if I put a figure there, slightly further back from the first two we put in. Head down, shoulders there. This one could be just walking in. And I could just continue with this all the way through. I could just keep adding figures. So walking figure coming across there. You know, you can add more in here. You can just endlessly keep going with this all the way across here, because what you have to do now is find ways to connect shapes. Yeah, you can use shadows. So if it's sunlight's coming across the image left to right, you can use shadows, curved lines. That figure can join into the car there. Connection in artwork is crucial, really. You can't have elements that sit on the ground without being connected to shapes around them. So I would just literally, but anything that goes further on over this area here needs to be more diminished than this area here, because I'll draw a circle around it. I know right from the beginning that that area there is going to be my focal point. So if I was to draw a circle around that area there, it's that area there that I want the viewer, when the viewer looks at this image, when we've finished it, I want you looking in that area there, not over here. So this area here is more important than the area down the back here. This is where, when we come to paint this, this is where we simplify this area here massively.
Ian, I have a request, and that is that you only during the demonstration here, turn off the camera on your iPad. I think the internet connection will be better.
Okay.
Yeah, so that the quality can be a bit higher. So if you can just press the camera symbol on the iPad to the left in the
stop video.
Yes, exactly. Hopefully, this will cause the quality to be slightly better. Now, that was all. Please continue. Thank you so much for everything you do.
Right. So there we go. That's how we develop. There are certain elements within this photograph that are useful. If you can see it on the camera there are a couple of rather interesting street lights there. So they are useful because it's a pretty horizontal image so far. So a couple of verticals there would be useful, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to add another one there, even though it's not there. All right, so you need some verticals within all this horizontal stuff. And that's how I would just develop this image. Very, very straightforward, really. I hope that helps you understand. It's how I deal with every single painting that I do. I first of all identify the big shapes, draw those in, and then I add in the smaller elements. So that's how I do it. And this is the drawing I did a little while ago, which is just a slightly more finished drawing, but it's exactly the same. It looks very messy and complex, but actually it's no different to what I've just done there. This one's probably just a little bit more finished. Yeah. So from here now, we'll go back to the image here. Now we come to paint it, and as I said, I tend to be more of a tonal painter than colorist. So to me, I now look at this in terms of its tone value. I've left that big street light out, obviously. I mean, that's no good. You can't put that in there. But now I look at it as in its tone range. Where are the lights? Where's the darks? And where are the mid values? And this is the key to painting, really. So if I look at the sky, I don't necessarily see the blue of the sky. All I see is it's the lightest value within the image. The buildings here, all right, if you squint your eyes at it, you can see there's so much dark here in like the top line of the roof there. If you just squint your eyes at your image, you'll see that tonally this area here is probably the darkest area within the image. So that's light, that's dark, and the road here is tonally darker than the sky. Yes? So that's how, the first thing I will do when I come to paint this now is to place in some of these values, not necessarily these massive darks here initially, but that's where we're ending up. That's where we're going. So the first thing I will do now is to place in those values on this piece of paper. I'm going to have to move my reference photograph over there for now. I know you lose a little bit of it. And I'll get some paint going here. You can see my palette, I hope you can. So there we go. So what I'll do is I'll take a little bit of, I've got verditer blue here, very similar to cobalt blue. And a little bit neutral tint, very keen on neutral tint. I don't really like overtly blue skies. So that's a little bit of verditer blue and a little bit of neutral tint. The key thing is tonally, the value needs to be correct. So what I'll do is I'll just go across that area there, big brush, and please, what I would suggest, don't paint around things. Don't be tempted to paint around anything. Go all the way down with that, just over that area there. Having done that, I'm going to take some, we'll try some yellow ochre just over here. And we'll have a look at this building here. We'll just stick a wash of yellow ochre over this. Again, you can let that bleed into some of this area over here that we've already done and come all the way down there. In fact, we'll probably go over all that. Bring that down there. What I would do at this point is be careful to stay off of the areas we want to leave light, i.e. those car screens. For now, I want to leave those just light. And we'll just pull some of that over, just like that. So you're now down to your sort of interest area, really, just over there, and that can go in there. Okay, we come to the road. As I said, tonally, a tiny bit darker than the sky up there. Back to my neutral tint. I'll pop a little bit of light red into neutral tint, just to warm it a little bit. And we'll see what this looks like. So, no, a little bit warmer, a little bit more light red into that. I'm very keen on temperature of things being correct. So we'll just come across the area there. We can go over these cars. Over here, over here. I've left the impression of a crossing there. It's not there in reality, of course, but it just is a way. for me to break up the road. Watercolor is very unique. If you overfill it, it will just go dead. So there we go. That's the beginning. That's got a starter. Let's just get a smaller brush. I'm always tempted just to smudge some of these areas and so they unify a little bit. I avoid straight edges like the plague. There we go. Right. Now, I think without further ado, I can probably begin getting myself a mix sorted out that will do the background for us. I'll just clean this palette up a little bit with some of these puddles. I'll explain a little bit about what I've achieved there for you while that's just drying off a little bit. Obviously, we've got the sky. We've identified the sort of structure of the yellow building on the left here. And I've put a little bit of alizarin crimson over that background there. And what you will, I hope, be alert to the fact is that I've allowed some of these colours to join and connect with each other. A little bit of a run back going on up there, but that's fine. And I always like watercolour to sort of mix and merge, to run together. This is the stage very often that, you know, a student in a workshop will say, "Oh, I'll give up. I don't like it, blah, blah, blah. It's all too messy," but this is perfect, really. This is really where we want it to be at this stage. So now we can begin to develop some of this. So,
Ian, we have some questions that I think would be great to ask. Sandrine has first and foremost, we had a question, what pencil you were using, and if it was a pencil for both the sketch and also for this sketch, for both of the sketches. And if so, what pencil do you recommend for sketching on watercolor, before painting on watercolor?
Well, it's an interesting question, really. I use a Faber-Castell, a propelling pencil. And if you can see it, it's that one there. It's got a 2mm 2B lead into it, which, you know, you just extend like this. If you can see that on the camera, 2mm, and it's 2B. It's quite a soft pencil, really. One of the questions I'm very often asked by students is, "Am I going to rub these pencil marks out?" question. And I always say no, because at the end of the day, you know, I always say it's a piece of artwork. And if at the end of the painting you can identify and see some of these pencil marks, then that's fine. I like to see them, really, because it will show the viewer something of where the painting began, you know, the sort of how I developed it with a pencil. So I'm quite happy if some of those pencil marks show through at the end of the painting.
Thank you. So that was one of the questions. And then Sandrina had a question that I really love. She says, "It's funny, the goal of the demo is to simplify complex scenes, but I find the sketch even more detailed than the reference. How is this possible?" And the laughing smiley. And I agree. You can see that in the middle background, you have added house roofs. So you have kind of made your own little tweak. Could you share? Yeah, the answer to that one.
Well, it's, as I said at the beginning, the part I'm interested in when it comes to streets is that top line, yeah, the area up there. So that is, to some degree, got to give the appearance of being buildings. Not so much down this back area here, but there are sort of certain points where, you know, if you overly abstract out that top line, then it won't read very well as a row of buildings. So
you're using this trick of symbolism, because our brains know that this is a building shape, because many of us have that imprinted on a deep level in our way of seeing images. So we will have an easier time reading the painting if you make this correct addition. And also, I can see that you have
abstract out the top line completely, then you would probably struggle to work out what it's supposed to be. Whereas a apex of a building like that with a couple of chimney pots on and what have you, whatever happens in the area in front there, you will, by simply the definition of the top line, convert it to a row of buildings disappearing down the street. That's the idea behind it. That's the thinking behind it. Let's hope I'm right.
Thank you so much for explaining that. We have one final question, and then I'll leave you to the next painting aspect, and that is who makes the palette that you're using? We had a question of the brand of the palette.
The palette?
Yeah, the palette itself, the metal palette.
Yeah, it's actually a plastic palette, this one.
Okay.
It's just a closable plastic palette, and believe it or not, I've had that 30 years. I paid about £3 for it in an art shop somewhere. I've absolutely no idea who makes it. There's no makers on it.
You were lucky.
Yeah, so I would always advise get a closable palette. I'll explain a little bit more at the end when we come to the end. I'll explain about why I like this one. For plein air sketching, it's painting. It's very light, being plastic, and it's just perfect if you're going to stand outside painting. And because it's got a closable lid on it, I can squeeze out these tubes of paint here. And people worry about squeezing out all this paint, but all I do is put a wet tissue over all this paint when I close it, and then they will stay moist, no problem at all. So, yeah. But as to who makes it, I have absolutely no idea. But there's plenty available on the internet. So, is that any help?
Yeah, both yes and no, I would expect. And then we have one final question, and that is what paper you are using. And then
this is waterford paper, Saunders Waterford, 300 GSM, rough surface. Okay, so I'm now going to begin working my way and do something with these buildings. So I'm just going to start up the top here. I hope you can see a little bit of that image there. If I lower that image there, you can see the top line I'm working to. So I'll start with that bit there. And I think I might have to stand it here. That's like it's better standing. And here, slightly darker. And then back. I'm adding some of these darks just under here. Put those chimney pots up there. A little bit warmer, just there. Okay. A little bit darker, a little bit warmer, a little bit burnt sienna into that mix I've got there. ultra dry brush this a little bit, just to indicate this first window here. Point on that. A little bit involved with this here. Now, a little bit of dry brush work, just come across there. There, okay. And just some of that run. Okay, it's fine. I'm not going to overly stress with that at that point. Just spray that. It can paint itself a little bit from that point there. I'm eager to move on further down here at the moment. So I'm going to go back, a little bit of neutral tint, a little bit of what I'm looking for is a warmish grey at this point. And we'll begin. I'm going to just deal with this area here. So if I just come into there, it needs to be a little bit darker there. Just with that. As I say, this is the area. Okay, good. And now we can just take that down. This is the area that carries less importance than the area up here. So here, I'm just going to brush across there like that. And I'm just going to soften that edge there, just up there. Just soften that into there. Just for now. Okay. With a slightly pointier brush, a little bit more tonal weight, not too much. I'm just going to indicate that vertical I placed there. And I'll melt some darker tones just in there, soft edged, not too much, any detail, no detail there required. And even with a damp brush, I can just let some of this run down here. Any of these little white flecks that appear here are what I'm very happy with those. I want those. You can't fill it all in. If you fill it all in, it just goes dead. This is where by just leaving a few of these little flecks, the viewer can do some of the work. A few points there. And I can do all this. This is a key thing with the watercolor. You know, while it's wet, you can add in these little bits. As once it's dried out, you have to leave it alone, because otherwise, this is when you start getting these horrible sort of marks, balloons, cauliflowers, and such like. So we've got that area there, and that's an area where I've got the canopy that sticks out the front of the hotel, which we want. I'm just going to soften some of that there. Okay, now we'll come to this sort of area here. The area in the distance where, with a pointy brush, I've now got this Escoda Perla brush, and I just want to go around some of the areas here, like the cast grains and such like, without overly fussing with it. This is where you can sometimes sort of be a little bit too careful, really. It's a balancing act between being too careful and not careful enough. Okay, I'm just going to spray that. Just let it paint itself at that point. Okay, now we're going to have a look at the front of this hotel. Just in this area here. A little bit of neutral tint here again. You can see a little bit of foliage behind there. Again, it's a tone thing. It's not a colour thing. It's a tone thing. It's, you know, quite dark under that canopy there. But again, don't, you know, you can go just a little bit lighter to begin with. And then you can always add in a little bit more tonal depth to it. As you know, watercolor, it's just obviously you're painting dark, light to dark. You can't go the other way around. Put it on the cast screen there. Just take that out. Another clean brush. I'm just gonna. Okay, it's fine. A little bit there.
Ian, we've had a couple of questions regarding if you spray water on the painting, and if so, where and why, and what spray bottle, and all of those things. Could you share a bit about the spraying on the painting process? Yeah, how to make that in a way that works for us instead of against us?
Yeah, the one that I'm using is it's a orchid mister. It's this bottle here. It's actually an orchid mister, and it's a very, very fine mist. The reason I do it is because obviously water, colour, and water is life to it. So by just misting it with water, it allows me to, it increases the working time where I can go back in and add a few dark areas if I need to. So it's just a way of keeping it what I'd call live, I think. If as I say, by just misting it, you'll be careful you don't overly blast it, otherwise it just obviously will cause too many problems. So it's perfect for just allowing me to increase the working time on it. That's all it is. There's no mystery to it as such, really.
Thank you so much for that clarification.
Okay, it's no problem at all. Okay, I'm just going to come back because I'm going to sort of do a little bit more work on the hotel now. Obviously, down the back end here, something I should explain, and watercolor works like any painting, really, medium is irrelevant. Opposites, so we've got obviously a lot of wet stuff going on down here. I hope you can see on the image there how I've minimized the detailing. This area, as I said earlier at the beginning here, carries less importance, really. It's painted correctly relative to what we wanted it to do. But there's a lot of, like, you know, just sort of wet and wet abstracted out. So in order to create more interest for a viewer, we now have to counter all the wet and wet stuff up, soft edge stuff down here, with some dry brush stuff on the building here. So it's opposites. You got light, dark, wet in wet, and we're going to do some dry brush work on the hotel here. All right. Now I'm going to concede a little bit to that red that's on the canopy there. So I'm just going to pull that into there. Okay. I think the red will end up being our unifying color. We can bounce that around. And you notice I haven't gone too red with that. As I say, I'm not really big on too much in the way of color. Just with a thirsty brush, I'll just take some of that off there. If I miss some of that, see, with a clean brush damp, I can lift out some of that to create mist, which is nice for atmosphere. Yeah, and later on when we come back to refine the image, when we add in any street lamps or traffic lights or anything that we'll add in, by which time that will be dry, tonally a little bit lighter. Any dark shapes I put in there will then come forward, giving you a great sense of depth. Remember, as an artist, you're trying to create depth in your work. So I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go on. Okay, back to the hotel. We're going to quickly just pop in some details on the hotel. We'll take the windows. Try and avoid putting windows in too dark. Tonally, they just need to do their job. So I've got a sort of a warmish dark there, I think. Let's have a look. So up here, again with this one up here, a little bit across the top there. It's at this point here, I just rather enjoy this bit actually, because up until the point that you start putting in the windows, it then begins to start to look like a building. Up until then, it doesn't really. You notice that I'm using a sort of dry brush technique where I can. You know, it's not overly detailed. You can even take a little bit out of the tissue just to create some variation. So they're not all tonally absolutely the same. And remember, I'm not here to create an architectural perfect representation of that building. Once you take the reference photograph away at the end of the day, people will just look at the painting. So I'm not looking to completely replicate what I'm looking at there. It's not what this is about. This is about just our vision, really. It's trying to create your vision. And once I feel I've done enough, then at that point I would leave it alone. So, for example, that window there, that one there, the two ones on the outside of those two that I just put in the middle are slightly weaker. So we can just use a little bit of dry brush technique there. Again, a little bit tonally lighter. And, you know, let's not overdeal with that, over stress about that. I like some of these like architectural lines that go across there. They're rather nice. Okay, come down to the bottom. We've got these archway windows here. So that one there, that one there, that one there. Just by the figure, that would be quite useful. That'll bring the figure forward a little bit. When time comes, very, very quickly, just flash in some of that balcony there. There's a little bit architectural line there. I've just realised I've missed that window there, so there. And then we come over to this right-hand side here. Another couple of windows just up here, slightly lower. It's just that one there. And then that one there. Hopefully that's a little bit damp there still. So just look under there. That's a little bit darker just under there. That should help push that canopy forward a little bit. Okay. And then just going to probably add in that little bit of foliage there. We can use that foliage that appears there. So I'll take a little bit of cadmium yellow. I think I'll put some cobalt blue into that. There's a little bit of red in the palette there, which I've used. And if I just spray so I get a softer edge on that, it's just a way of, it's a little bit of foliage just in that left-hand corner on that building there. So it's just a way that I can just edge that figure off there. And a clean brush will just soften that off there. Okay. There's a few more bits of that foliage just appear just at the front of the hotel there, just across there, a couple of bits there. Lovely. And again, with just a clean brush, I'll just soften some of those out. Okay, good. And we'll even throw a little bit in there. That's good. Okay, now probably a little bit tonally darker stuff just under there and a couple of places. Won't hurt. And let's have a look. Okay. Now, so I've got clean fingernail. I'll just pull out some of the verticals on there that just hold that thing up. Okay, so where am I going? It's looking good and coming on. Connection, key thing in artwork, as I've said before. We're nearly at the break point here where I feel I've got enough going on at the background there. I might just have one more scoot across there and we'll take a quick break. But I'm just going to use, as I say, a lot of wet and wet stuff, counter that with a little bit of dry brush in order to connect this area here. I'm just going to use a dry brush technique. That's not much paint in the brush. Because I'm on rough paper, as I draw the brush across the paper, it should leave a somewhat broken line as such. See that? That's just what I call a dry brush technique, and that just helps to connect these figures eventually. You bring that into the figure, it doesn't matter, and into that figure, even into the car. It's just a way to connect those elements across that foreground area there. Vertical marks there. Okay, so it's coming on really, really well. Last thing I'll do before we take a quick break now is I'm just going to put a little bit of shadow work on the building here, just so we start to lift the sunlight a little bit, because obviously this one's going to be about basically light. So we're going to just put some shadow work on the building. And what I'm using here is a little bit of basically French ultramarine. I can put a little bit of maybe light red into it or something. A little bit more ultramarine. Or something I tend to spend more time on the palette than I ever do on the paper. Plenty of water, nice and transparent. And let's have a look. So I've got a light source coming from the top left across the image. And we're eventually going to cast this shadow all the way across the foreground area here. So we're going to just imagine that shadow underneath could have been a little bit darker, I think. I'll take a little bit more ultramarine and just strengthen that a little bit. You've got to be careful with this one. It needs to be, consistency is a key thing in watercolor. Wet, dry. There we go. I'll put a little bit under there as well. And I'm just going to invent one or two marks coming across there. They're not there in reality, of course, but it will throw more light onto the image. This is sort of the artist's sort of a vision thing, isn't it, really? You know, this is where we can create these things. It's the beauty of water painting, really, isn't it? That it's our world. As I said earlier, once that reference photo disappears, then anybody looking at the finished thing that we've created will see what we wanted them to see. Will stand up on its own. Just clean brush and just soften that out there. Some of these sharper shadows rather nice. Okay. Now, finally, just before we take a quick break for a few minutes, have a bit more of a chat possibly. I'll just add in a few of these warmer architectural masks just to get the perspective. And perspective is something I heard mentioned earlier on. Somebody said they struggle with perspective. There's no real mystery to perspective. As somebody once said to me when they were asked the question about perspective, it's just got to look right. Which sounds very simple, but it's a good way to think about it, because it's very easy to get lost in fear of perspective. But really, it's not that difficult. If you draw something and you don't like the way it looks, just draw it again. Okay, let's have a quick look at that. I'll speak more about perspective if it'll help when we do the question and answer session at the end on this one. But I think for now, I think we're at a point where we can take a break.
Thank you so much, Ian. This was fascinating, and those final touches made such a huge difference. It's been fascinating watching and just wondering what's gonna happen, and then yeah, beautiful process. We have Christine writing wonderful, Sandrine writing clever. Leila says favorite part to watch are these details. And Charmaine is asking, what consistency of the paint were you using for those darker details that you did at the end?
Yeah, I mean, if you can see my palette, you know, you'll get the initial washes that you put on with a big brush, and you cover large areas, the sky, the ground area, and such like. I paint with a sort of large mop brush. The consistency is like basically sort of very wet. If you tip the palette upside down, it'll flood out the palette or go on the floor. So it's, you know, you've got a high level of water into the paint, the pigment, and when I get to these areas where I'm putting in like this, trying to get this dry brush effect, the volume of pigment is higher than the level of water, so it would become, you know, you tip your palette up, and those mixes that will produce this dry brush effect, they won't run out the palette. They will stay very, very stable on the palette. It's like you know, I mean, I've heard the term mentioned, like you go from like cold tea, milk, cream. Joseph was the first one that I was aware of who used that terminology, and it perfectly describes watercolor. Probably one of the ill understood things that watercolors come across is understanding consistency, you know, like from very watery mixes through to slightly thicker ones. You can get to a point where you're putting your details in at the end, that you're down to basically virtually neat paint, you know, with the minimal amount of water in order to get that depth of value that you're looking for, and you know, what have you. So that's where we are. So
Thank you so much for that. And yeah. Leslie is writing so beautiful already. Florence is writing beautiful. Tanya says really beautiful process and love your encouraging words. And Eleonora says very nice demo. Thank you very much. Jamie writes, love how you encourage us to be the artist and create our world. I tend to get so caught up in the real details. Thanks. And Maribel says, I love the cast shadows effect. Yes, I agree. That was the beautiful touch, and it just created that additional depth to everything. Thank you so much for sharing. And now you're welcome back to turn on your camera on your iPad so we get to hang out with you.
There we go.
Welcome back. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone.
So for everyone who is painting, now we're gonna give you some time to catch up with this, and we will continue, and Ian will paint the lower part with the people and the cars. So that's what we have ahead of us. So just to continue exploring, and then you can explore this in your own works. And yeah, you're welcome to stay. And remember, if your question has not been answered along the workshop, we have a Q&A portion at the very end. And of course, people might feel that you make it look so natural, but it's very hard to know where to begin. And if someone is thinking, I can't paint streets, it's too much, buildings, people's cars, it's all too overwhelming, what is something that you would say to that person?
Um, well, if you watch what I've done here, or when I come to these cars and the figures that I'm going to do, you could practice doing those on a piece of paper, really. Just practice your figures. I mean, I very often will get a sheet of paper, as I used to do this, and I'd just draw figures, a row of figures in different poses, walking towards me, walking away from me. When it comes to things like cars, the key element of a car is basically the screen. I would avoid things like painting cars side on, and because I never paint cars looking at the side of them with the wheels, because I found it incredibly, almost impossible not to make them look like dinky toys. They look so naive when you do that. So you'll notice that all the cars in this scene here, you can even look on the photograph of the paint I've got there. I tend to paint them sort of either back or front on, with a minimal amount of attention to the wheels. And I often find in workshop students a tendency to try and put wheels on them, and they can't. It's very difficult to do that, I find, unless you're doing like very detailed work, which I don't do. So it's the screen that's the key bit, and you'll see when we come to the second half where I'm going to add in these cars that I've got here. It's basically, just they're not as difficult as they look. You've just got to get the proportion correct. You can just measure them with with your pencil. See how deep is the screen relative to the body of the car. How wide is it? Very often people will do them too narrow, so they just look completely wrong. Everything's a proportion. A lot of people will do figures where the body or the legs are way too short in relation to the body, so immediately they look wrong. It's a proportion thing. Everything's proportion. They talk about an adult figure being like 7.5 heads. That's actually a good approximation. You want to try and measure how many heads go down to the waist, and then what's below the waist. How far down do they go? And very often, it's very easy to convince a viewer to your picture, if you're doing representational artwork, that it is a figure if it's proportionally correct. And a car is exactly the same. So if you're intimidated by these kind of subjects, try and remember how I dealt with that first wash. It was just once I've started putting in the details, that background of all those buildings there is nothing more. Just concentrate on the top line, abstract out the bottom. When the area is dry, that background area, that's basically just a misty background area, right? You could always add in a couple of windows here and there with a dry brush technique, slightly darker paint, dry brush. And it's like the hotel on the left-hand side, if it is a hotel that I've done on this one. It didn't look like anything until I sort of popped a few darker windows in. And then all of a sudden, everyone's looking at that. Oh, immediately it's a building. And it's just an illusion. It's not. Yeah. It just looks like So, and somebody said about they find themselves obsessing about detail. And that's where I think you can just get overwhelmed by it, and start thinking like an artist if you can, and just because it's in a photograph, or just because you're standing in front of something where you can see all this detail, you don't have to include it all. You've got to start thinking like an artist. You're not a camera, you're an artist. You're trying to create a painting. So if you record every single thing or try and record everything, I would suggest that you maybe just need to switch your mindset a little bit and try and find methods by which you can create paintings more than something that's trying to overly represent what it is you're looking at. Simple to say, difficult to do. So hopefully it's things like this that will maybe try and begin the process of people trying to change their mindset a little bit about it. I mean, it's very difficult to get this in one session, one lesson. It takes I hate to be but it takes a long time. it's very good to watch how this is done.
But then you have to try it out and try it out and try it out as well.
Yeah, and do it. You got. I mean, watercolor's a bit like, I always think driving a car. When you first begin to learn to drive a car, you can move off in first gear and you can basically steer in a straight line. And then the instructor will say to you, right, we're going to change to second gear now. You try and change to second gear and you take your eye off the steering and you go into off the road, because you're looking down at the gear lever. Painting watercolors similar to driving. You can remember one thing and then you try and do the next thing and the first thing you tried goes wrong. But it's exactly like driving in that once you're shown what the rules of it are and how it actually works, it's a bit like driving. People drive cars and they don't even think about changing it. They're not consciously aware they're doing it. It's a bit like me when I'm painting this. So much of what I'm doing here, I'm thinking about three things at once, but I can just do it because I've done it so often. It's just muscle memory. So once you can start to juggle those elements, then but you really do need to just, first of all, understand what it is that makes paintings work. And I often say to people, it's irrelevant whether you're painting trees and fields or whether you're painting this. The rules are all the same. A common thing I hear is, I can't do cars, or I can't do buildings. And I say, what do you paint? They say landscape. And I say, well, if you can paint a tree, you can paint a car. There's no difference. You're not painting a car, you're just. And I know that sounds very simplistic, and I don't mean to oversimplify it. I know it's slightly more, but really, it's just a shape. You have to learn to paint shapes. Really, so I'll try and demonstrate that when we do the details on the second half. How actually figures are definitely a perfect example of proportion over detail.
Thank you so much for that reply. So what I take from that is that we both need to break it down, practice the specific steps until that becomes more automatic for us. And then we are capable of breaking it down and practicing and painting at the same time when we do this in a structured way, but also take the time to actually learn it.
Well, I think something I would like to just say is that it took me a long time to come to the realization that paintings actually work on conflict. You have to think about that element to any painting, whether you paint oil, acrylic, watercolor. They work on conflict. You need opposites. It's the opposites that make them work. So any painting that you see on the screen that I've done already, you want to try and search for those elements. So if I've got light, I need some dark. If I have some cool areas, I need to incorporate some warm areas. If I have big shapes, I need some smaller shapes. If I've got wet in wet, I need some dry brush. You just have to try and plan your approach. As I say, it's a bit like juggling. It's hard to think of all that while you're doing it. It becomes muscle memory after a while. You do it instinctively. But it's the key thing to painting. It's conflict. Try and remember that. It's probably one of the key things. You need to think about that.
Thank you for that bonus advice, that additional piece that will make paintings work. Thank you so much. And if you are here today and you feel that this was a very wonderful taste, but I actually would like the guidance to make this more automatic and to go on to a deeper level with full scenes, different light situations, with guided instructions from Ian, you can now join his exclusive course that he has created. It's a unique, wonderful opportunity to learn from him in an online environment. And it's called Dynamic Street Scenes in Watercolor, because that's what it's about. And this course will suit artists who already have basic watercolor painting skills and want to learn how tone, shape, and edge control affect clarity and impact of a painting and achieve a new level of mastery, become more expressive, and also find that looseness without losing what the subject is about, but make it very easy for the viewer to read your paintings and be able to confidently compose, draw, and paint complex scenes without feeling overwhelmed, but instead having that feeling that you break down things into digestible, understandable pieces that you can practice and get good at and make their paintings stand out. And for those who are curious and wonder what this is all about, let's walk through this and also see if we can learn something from it already today. For instance, you start with lesson 1, tonal study, wet street scene in monochrome, because there is a reason you start with this one. Could you share the value of focusing on a monochrome piece in watercolor specifically?
Very much so, yes, because when I began and I was doing workshops with artists, a common phrase, and many of the people listening today or watching today will have heard the term that people like me would say, use a limited palette. And I heard that phrase an awful lot when I was beginning my journey in watercolor. Use a limited palette. I had no clue what it was they was meaning. I used to think to myself, what's a limited palette? What colors are you talking about? And if I was to go back 30 years and somebody said to me, I wish the piece of advice, I'd love one piece of advice from a so-called professional artist, I wish they'd have said to me, buy a big tube of ultramarine blue or warm sepia and paint every single picture you paint with warm sepia for the next 12 months. Don't buy any other colors. Just use that. And I would have advanced my skills 5 to 10 years in a year, because all paintings or all images are basically made up of those 3 different values: light, mid-tones, and darks. So the first image that I produced on that workshop is a tonal painting to perfectly demonstrate that if you get your tonal values correct, you will have a very, very desirable image. And it's tone that makes it work. And the mistake that I see so often is blue skies, green trees, red roofs, but they're tonally very balanced. And you can prove that to yourself if you ever want to check out your artwork and you've painted a picture, you're not quite sure why it's not working. iPhone's the perfect tool for taking a photograph of your image, convert that image to black and white on your iPhone. If you can still see the image very clearly once you've converted it to black and white, you're well on the way. If you convert a color image of painting you've done to black and white, and you lose some of the areas, you can be sure of one thing: you have got your tone values wrong, and that's why you're struggling. Perfectly fine to put a blue sky and a green tree, but make sure the blue is a different tonal value to the green. And with personally, I see tone very, very clearly. I can identify, even if I'm looking at color image, I can identify where the light areas, the dark areas are, mid values. But I think one of the major problems of students painting in any medium really is this tendency to want to paint. I used to do workshops when I first began, and people saying to me, I can't get that color. And I used to think to myself, you don't need that color. Just paint the value. And I just couldn't understand. Couldn't quite get my head around why people were so messing around trying to get the right value orange or the right value green or something. So yeah, paint. I often advise a few students, I've said to them, paint, one paint in every 5 that you try and paint, just paint it in one color, ultramarine. Why ultramarine or why warm sepia? Why? Because in their pure form, they are dark. That means they have a very wide tonal range. As they come out the tube, if they're very, very dark, you can paint it with very limited water in it, just enough to make it flow, all the way down to lots of water and very little of the pigment, and you'll get a very, very light wash. So it's got a very large tonal range. That's why you can produce really nice tonal images. with dark value colors. So ultramarine, warm sepia, neutral tint would work. But that would be my advice, and it really will hone your skills as a painter by trying to do that. Because if you paint it in one color and you can't see it, you will know you've got it wrong.
Another aspect that I just want to add is how beautiful the watercolor medium is when we don't get stuck in overworking. And here we can see the freshness, which you probably allowed yourself even more because of not having to think about the color aspect.
Yeah,
You can see that you really can make the most out of the watercolor medium as well. So the tonal values is one thing, and then the watercolor technique is that other bonus of having this framework where you don't have to focus on everything at once.
indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so alive and fresh and beautiful in that sense as well. So,
Well, you're removing the element of trying to mix up colors
yeah,
because it's very quick. It's a beautiful way of painting. I love painting one color all the time. I very happily do it most of the time.
but because many people love color as well, the second lesson is exactly about how to add color without getting lost in the color choices. So here you talk about limited color, warm and cool, etc. Can you share some of the key highlights and insights that we explore in this aspect and in this lesson?
Yeah, it's moving up the elements within painting. I spoke about conflict in artwork, and when it comes to adding in color, as I do on the second one that I paint, then I maximize the use of like warm and cool, really. So I made sure that the painting that I did had a high level of sunlight to shadow, and then using color, I used the warmer colors in the sunlit area, and in the shadowed areas, I made sure I used blues, purple, or mauves, whatever, cooler side of the palette, and that created that sort of impact of, that conflict I spoke about earlier. Warm, cool. If you paint warm, you need some cool areas. And that way, bang, immediately the painting looks more interesting to a viewer and it maximizes the sunlight. Any color I added into that, if I'm going to use color, I tend to use it very limited. So I never paint, like if I've got 10, 15 figures in a street scene, I would never go around painting every single one of them, blue jumper, red jumper, yellow jumper, green. I would have a very unified color. So I think I use like a red or an orange or something, and I would sort of bounce that color around the image. So a painting that's done in color doesn't need that many colors to look very colorful. In fact, they look better because I always think too many colors within a painting. I sort of use the term as visual noise to me. It's just it's too much. So if I use color, I tend to use it very wisely. I quite like, for example, using something like lavender, and you can put spots of lavender all over a street scene. Completely inexplicable what they are, but it helps to unify the picture. It's really, really nice. So that's what goes on. It's basically a demonstration of how you get warm and cool, and you have a unifying color. You can look at something and sort of, you might see a lot of blues. Boatyards are good for blues. You see a lot of blues in boatyards. You can use that as your color to a sort of a correct tonal range with a sort of a bounce of blue around the sort of interest area and across the image, and all of a sudden it just unifies it. It's just a magical quality in a painting, really. So
thank you for taking us through the importance of cool and warm and working on that duality. Now let's dive into depth and perspective, which is another aspect that we need to take into consideration, especially if we paint cities. Landscape, you kind of can almost get away with not focusing on that. but it's crucial. And it's one of those things where drawing is also very important. Could you share some about this aspect that is included in the focus for lesson 3?
Lesson 3, yeah. I mean, we're talking about creating depth in the work, Hannah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the third one that I do, yeah, we've got the colour in there. And again, what I've done is used that sort of opposites, warm and cool. So towards the background area, the edges are softer. We've got softer edges, cooler values in the paint. And as the image comes forward, as the elements in the painting come forward, we tend to warm up the colours. They become warmer, edges become harder, and the shapes become bigger. So what you'll see is that the foreground shapes obviously are bigger. We diminish them as they go back, and basically we're always trying to create that sort of focal area, something pretty specific that the viewer to the picture will look at. In the last one I do, there's a strong vertical with the tower there, and that brings you down into the main focal area. So it's all about like directional lines that take you in, and again, sort of warm and cool, really, isn't it? It's just, and I think on the last one I made it a wet street, so I sort of demonstrate how to create a wet street, which is always, one of the most delightful aspects of watercolor. That you can create beautiful images with reflections, whether it be boats on water or whether it's the street. It's magical, and really lovely to sort of get a technique for doing that. Really, very enjoyable. I really enjoy painting wet street scenes. Yeah.
And everything ties together very beautifully. You can really feel that it's a moist environment when you watch the image. You can almost feel that it's a misty feeling in the air because of the color choices and technical decisions that you've made.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking us on this trip through these 3 different aspects. So the first one was, monochrome, the value of painting in only one specific dark color. And then we moved to light and temperature and warm and cool colors. And then we have also the depth and perspective and the moist atmosphere and the wet street scene that we have here. And when you choose to join, and if you follow this course, then you will learn to break any city scene into 3 simple shapes and build up expressive depth. See how to paint dynamic compositions with figures and architecture and some cars as well, without fear, and also understand how to use tone and edge control as well as color to lead the viewer's eye and create atmosphere and balance in your paintings. Improve your drawing skills, which is a huge part if you want to paint realistic cityscapes, and learn to create perspective in your paintings. See how to avoid overworking, understand what to paint, what to omit, and when to stop, and also when not to stop, because you need to add those final touches that created that real magic that we saw when Ian demonstrated for us previously. And also learn how to make your paintings more attractive by adding conflicts of tones, conflicts of shapes, as well as color. And we have 2 different learning formats for those who want to continue and learn more from Ian. We have the standard plan, which entails all of the lessons that we have just walked you through. And the premium plan also has individual feedback from a professional artist, our curator, within 75 days after joining us. You will also get an official certificate of completion when you have completed the course when you join the premium plan. And individual written feedback is a wonderful thing for anyone who wants that accountability and also who want faster progress, because personalized feedback targets your strengths and areas for improvements, and it will help you gain insight to refine your techniques and your creativity and find those specific spots that you can just tweak a little bit to reach that next level for you. And it's also a tailored experience, and direct interaction can make it very specific, will make it very specific to your work. And this is also something that helps very many people to actually go through the course with as much focus as possible. So if you feel that you need that extra little motivation boost, then that's a wonderful opportunity for everyone who needs and wants that. And there are only 30 spots available on the premium plan. So this is a unique opportunity to learn from the master Ian McManus and also receive individual feedback from our wonderful Terrelyn, who will give the feedback this time around. And right now we have this opening launch of this course, so we have an exclusive offer. So these are the prices that we have. The regular price is $139 for the premium plan, but now it's $109, and the standard plan has the standard regular price of $129, and now it's only $99. And if you are watching this live right now, while we are still having this conversation, there's an additional 10% off. So if you join us while we're still having this workshop, these are the prices that you will pay. So that's what you will see when you press join the course and scroll down to purchase. That's what's gonna be the prices for you. So this is not just about learning technique, it's about changing the way you think when it comes to painting cityscapes in watercolor. So click the join the course button. If you scroll down, you will find that if you want to learn more and really go deep with Ian. And now, with that being said, it's time to see how your painting turns out. So I'm gonna hand it over back to you, Ian, for the second and final painting part.
Right, here we go. So now we move on to the ground area, the area that we were basically building up to. Everything I did up until this point was basically just bringing me up to this point now. So we're relatively happy with what we achieved in the background there. So we'll now begin to develop this ground area. Remember that I said that that area in front of this sort of obviously sort of main building in the front, that area there is going to be my main focal area. And we'll, as we move to this sort of area towards the right-hand side, the area that we feel covers, doesn't really need so much in the way of detail will be less described, and we'll just do enough to make this work. So I'm right-handed, so I'm going to work from the left to the right rather than sort of come back across myself. So hopefully you can see how I do this. Right, so I'll begin with these two foreground figures here. I'm going to, I'll take a little bit of sort of Van Dyke brown, just take a little bit of blue or something into it. Skin color, I go quite orangey with that. People sometimes say, blimey. But when it comes to doing figures, you really want the faces to jump. So go as bright as you like with them. I'll actually do the back of the lady there, this gentleman here. You can go all over that. I know it looks a bit scrappy to begin with, but it will be fine. And start top to bottom. So if I just then go in and sort of do a little bit of hair there. And there's a gentleman here again. And then we'll come down. If I take a little bit of sort of blue, they are over in the left-hand corner. They are just leading, really. So I'll just start the lady there. I'll run these things together. They need to connect, so I'm very happy just to put a little bit of blue in there like that. Run it into the guy. It's always the most difficult thing, really. And if I just stick a darker value on him there, that's sort of scrappy to begin with, but they'll come together. Draw a line out there. Okay, so come down to the her off the edge there. I think the key thing probably is just don't overly fill them. Let's shadow these out in a minute. Once we put the foreground shadow in, so they can connect there. Now going with the figure here, and this is where dry brush comes in really. Remember, dry brush, as I've said, is this tendency for less water in the brush, more pigment. When it comes to legs on figures, you really don't want them overly defined. I almost feel I'm getting too involved in that, but there we go. That'll do. All right, as I say, they're going to be lost in shadow on the base half anyway. It's the top bit that I'm mainly interested in. And I've given this guy here a bag or something to carry. Okay. And it's nice if they just disappear off the bottom of the image like that. You know, it's just gonna, and I say we're going to run shadow across here. So remember I said about connecting, the importance of connecting your shapes. So I'm going to pull that figure there into there, and we'll run straight into this figure here. So start with the face, just looking down. And then we'll come in. This is sort of more right in the sort of main focal area. So I use that red. I'm not going to paint him bright red, it's too much. I will make him a very warmish dark, sort of to hint a little bit towards that red. So side on. Don't overly fill it. Clean brush. Like that. At which point now the face will have dried a little bit, enough for me to just melt the hair in there. There you go. Okay, now I'll go down and pop the legs on. So just walking across the image. The key thing with figures, balance. So the head's there, you need a foot below the head. Yeah. So if I was to say from the knee, do that there, and take the other leg from somewhere there, just coming back like that. And then with a clean brush, I can just indicate that foreleg there. You don't need to do too much with that. Okay. Again, he'll be lost in a little bit of shadow. Let's take a look at the car behind him. So when it comes to cars, there we go. We'll take from the figure, so the figure connects into the car. Start light, like that. Just a little bit of the backside of it there. Okay, so we've got the light in. Let's add the dark. Use this Van Dyke brown, tiny little bit of ultramarine into it. And we'll stick the darker bit there. And darker there. Just hint at the wheel on the side, maybe a door mirror there. Okay. Be all right for just a minute. Okay. A couple of tail lights. So we'll just hint at a tail light that side. Tail light that side. That's fine. And with a little bit of green, because obviously I got that green there earlier, I'm just gonna define the edge of that car on that left-hand side there. It's just an excuse for me to use that there, just to bring that up a little bit. Could lose that bit of white there. That's fine. And that figure nicely melting into the side of that car is always best. So we've got another figure here now. I've just placed another figure there. So I'm going to counter change this one. Light figure, dark behind. I don't need too much dark behind. I'll just use a little bit of that blue. I'm just going to cut across the shoulder there. Tell me how weak this is. The figure will look white. So we're basically just counter changing that one. These are that's sort of dark on light on the screen there. This one's sort of light on dark behind there. Go to the legs. So waist is going to be there somewhere. Again, head there. Front foot there. Just indicated. The other leg, just behind there. Just down there. Okay. And then we'll take a little bit of this value I'll put on there and just melt some of it in there. Okay, it's fine. Another connection line there. Okay, good. Now I think I've got another car sitting there. So again, I'll just use the word light to dark. Just something like that. I know this one's ill-defined, but that's perfectly fine. We're moving off the target area here. I don't need to overly do this area. Otherwise, I'm creating too many points of interest. And that's the key thing when it comes to successful compositions, really. Remember what it is you're actually trying to tell the story is there. This is just, it's got to be done correctly. It's got to play its part, but it doesn't need to be. And what I've just done there is a perfect example, really, of being an artist and not a copyist. That bit of foliage doesn't exist on the reference photograph, but once the reference photograph is taken away, then who's to know it wasn't there? Let's do a little bit out there. Okay. Now we move to another figure here. Again, just there. Okay, we need to see these ones a little bit. So choose a little bit of, I'll call it value, not color. Whatever value I put on them just has to be seen. So we'll make them just slightly darker than the background if I can, a little bit. So there we go. It's fine. Connect it across there somehow. No indication of a car there. So again, from the figure, take the figure into the car. And again, the car there. So if I just put, say I put a grill at the front there like that, if this one come towards us. We'll take a lighter value. Down the base there, slightly nearer than this one. I've just popped in there so the wheels can come slightly lower there. And then we'll just get the darker value. Keep speaking about value, but it really is value. It's not necessarily color. You can see it's all very limited on its color, but as long as the value is correct, it'll work okay. Just, I could get a thirsty brush just to dry the lighter area there. Any of these are abstract marks I'm putting at the back here. Just literally me trying to make the image work without overdoing it. And we've got this one over here. So I'll take some coloured water across the screen, just there. I've done that because I don't want the white of that screen there to compete with the white on that one there. The strong counter change from white to the dark areas around this one will bring you over there because it counter changes light to dark. Over here, if I had that screen pure white against that background there, it would just cause you to bounce from here to there. But I want you looking at that one, not this one. So that's why I lost the white on the screen there, because the emphasis will then go on that one there. So again, I'll go to the back. I'll just put a light wash. This is just a little bit of sort of grey I had in the palette. Haven't done that. We'll then go to the darker value I have, which is just this Van Dyke brown. I'll put a little bit of blue in it, not too browny. Stick a little blue in it just to knock it back a little bit. Roll across the back there. Got a bit much there, and then quite dark on the base, just where they hit the road. There. And then an indication, there's obviously the door mirror sits there. And just basically see the sidewall there, approximately there. Just trying to leave a tiny little bit of light just there. And off there. What I might do, just use a little bit of that green just to close off that composition on that side. Again, not there on the image, but just as an excuse for me just to close off that side of the image a little bit. Probably melt that side of the car into that a little bit. That creates that, as I spoke about, soft edges, hard edges. We'll lose a little bit of that car into there. Don't need to see that complete left-hand side of that. Okay, so it's basically developed this area at the front here. I'll tell you what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to put some car shadow on the ground, and then we'll finish off with some calligraphy in terms of street lights and traffic lights and what have you. So I'm going to take a little bit of this French ultramarine. It's the same shadow colours I used up there, French ultramarine. I'll put some light red into it, very gradually, a piece at a time. Just see if we can get a warmish shadow colour. I mean, it's we don't want it too bluey. We want to try and get a warmish shadow colour if we can. Just a value, really. Okay, in order to bring it across, let's just see what this looks like. A little bit. First of all, we'll start down here. We'll bring a few connecting shadows across the street here. Just across there like that. Off that car there. Off to there. This one here. Yeah, that's okay. Like that there. And now we'll come a little bit nearer. So I'll increase the brush size a little bit. Let's have a look at this, see what we can do with this. So we'll come to this car here. There. And if I come from there, perspectively bring that back there into that area there. I'll come across there. and maybe back there. And then I'll increase the value of that a little bit as we get a little bit nearer this bottom left-hand corner, because let's just close that in there. That's nice. I'll carry that across there, okay? And just blend that in there. See where I've lost the bottom of those figures in that shadow, which is quite nice. And that shadow line there is hopefully reading perspectively correct in terms of carrying us into the perspectively into the picture. Okay, I think what that does is proves my earlier point that in order to get light, you need some dark. Let's throw a bit of water at that just to soften that down a little bit. Okay, now while that just sorts itself out, I'm going to go to some verticals. Fair amount of linear stuff going across there, so I'm going to pop a few verticals in here now. So again, I'm going to get this warmish dark. And what I'm going to be cautious of is not going too dark, because it's very easy to go too dark at this point. It's a tone balance, really. You need harmony in your tones, in your values. You can go too strong and they just jump too much, they're just too dark. So this is a balance, really. So try that, just see what that looks like. You can probably see these on the photograph just about. They are, that's what you call street furniture, really. And the minute you start doing that, once the pole that they're standing on is just indicated there, and I say indicated because I'm not going to bring it all the way down. Perfect example where the viewer, you can work out. I don't need to bring it all the way down. It's like one of the best analogies for painting watercolor I sort of came across that over my little sort of journey into this medium is that it's similar to golf. If I painted this painting in, by the time I finished it, in say 200 brush strokes, most of my students would probably paint it in 400. And therein lies the thing. My brother plays golf, he's very good. If we play golf, he'll go around in sort of 80 or 90 strokes. I'll go around in like 140, 150. He's a much better golfer than me. And if you think about that in your watercolors, really, less is more. The fewer brush strokes that you use, you'll have more clarity in it. It's a key thing in watercolor. It's trying to retain clarity, transparency. This area to the back here that we did right at the beginning, where you might have thought, oh, I need to do more. If you'd have been doing it yourself, I need to do more, and you start popping in like windows and such like. You can see. I hope you can see at this point that the benefit of not doing more is this atmosphere that I've created at the back of the image here. So we're now popping one or two of these like indications of possibly street lights or something. Where, they're not there again, but they're an excuse that we use in this kind of artwork to just sort of sell it as a street, really. I've got a few orange tail lights on that thing there. This is now what you call it, basically the finishing touches, really. And this this orange can act as that unifying color, really. I can pop a bit there, stick a bit there, pop a bit there, whatever. Okay, so look, too bad. Very quickly. I think. Create something. Like a little bit of, yeah. I mean, they're an obvious thing, really, but I've sort of known for putting these birds in skies. The reason I put these in, to me, they are, I call them space makers, because if you think about it, you've got the viewer, the birds, the sky. So they create depth, if that makes any logical sense. Okay, now call this the fiddle stage, although I'm not fiddling. I am literally just trying to bring us to sort of a more complete image. That area up there, a little bit of dry brush there, a little bit of dry brush there, a little bit of dry brush there, just to there we go. And then finally, I'm just going to use a little bit of gouache. Because I paint so fast, it's not always easy for me to retain all the highlights that I want. So I use designer gouache, titanium white, just to halo light some of these elements. And you can't go too much of this because very quickly you can overdo it. I just go across the top of that canopy there. Indicate a couple of those verticals there. I halo light this figure, central figure just on top of his head, and maybe on the shoulders there, just to bring him up a little bit. Just the top of that car there. This figure here, as soon as I pop a little bit of light on his shoulders and top of his head, he'll jump a little bit more than he currently does. Okay, I don't want to overdo this. Okay. A couple of breakup spots there, won't hurt. Okay. Right on there. Okay, so I'll take a look at that. So as just a very sort of a demonstration, I think if I take a reference photograph away from that for a second now. Sorry about the mess behind it. And what I'll do is I'll take the tape off that. Once we get a clean edge, we'll probably get a better reading of it. There we go.
Wow, that's just such a beautiful painting, and it's so different from the reference. I am awed by your expertise in knowing how to transform the reference into a watercolor painting. Thank you so much for sharing all of this, Ian.
That's a great pleasure.
We have Jamie writing, lovely. Menchu's writing, so relaxing to watch Ian paint with a blackbird singing song. And then we have incredible birds in the sky of the painting started to sing from the beginning. Ian is a magician. Joke aside, it was a very inspiring demo. Thanks a lot. Roseanne writes, lovely. Thank you, Ian. Dana writes, wow. Carolyn writes, thank you so much. This was very helpful. Caroline writes, a wonderful sense of light, amazing scene painted from a photo I would never have picked. Thank you for this inspiring demo, Ian.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, and Elizabeth says adds charm to the reference. Absolutely. And Layla writes, thank you so much. Just purchased premium and look forward to learning more. Congratulations and welcome, Layla.
That's excellent.
And Gisela or Gisela, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but either way, writes amazing and so inspirational. Can't wait to try. Smiley. And Ivana writes, thank you. Carrie writes, so beautiful. Join the course. Welcome, Carrie. Warmest welcome. As a side note, remember that those of you who are here live, when you join us, when we still have this conversation, you have that additional, yeah, additionally good offer happening. Menchi writes, the painting has completely transformed the photo into much nicer. Yes, I agree. Dita writes, great work, so loose. Ina writes, it is so wonderful, thank you. So take this to heart, Ian. Olga writes, super, merci. And Dave writes, stunning, thank you. Francine writes, thank you for this workshop, amazing. Carol writes, thank you, this was wonderful to watch. Sue says, thank you, thank you. Lil says, awesome. Teresa writes, brilliant, thank you, Ian. Anna writes, really amazing. Barbara writes, thank you for this interesting workshop, wonderful painting. Gabriela writes, wonderful, thank you, Ian. Jackie writes, wow, thanks so much. Leslie Ann writes, wow, very wonderful. Kaya writes, thank you, beautifully done. Edwin writes, most impressive by style and skills to make a complex subject so simple yet alive. Florence writes, quite appealing. Julie says, thank you, Ian. Josefina writes, amazing. I learned a lot. Thanks. Wonderful to hear, Josefina. Leah says, Ian, thank you so much. So helpful. I'm steps away from my next big advancement in watercolor painting. You have helped me speed that up. We have Connie, Feroz, Tanya, Karen, Michelle, Jim, Sue. Oh, Sue, welcome to the course, Sue. Can't wait, she says. Beautiful. Oh, and Jim also, welcome to the course, Jim. Mercedes writes, thank yous. Pille writes, the world is lighter in watercolor. Yes, lighter, more beautiful place when you know how to depict it. I don't think that's for all watercolor paintings, but for this one, absolutely. Tanya writes, wonderful. Katrinka writes, probably, thank you. Janina writes, beautiful. And Elaine has a question. What do you use for a painting board? It looks like masonite in Swedish. I don't know what the word for that is in English.
This is a studio board. It's just literally hardboard.
Yeah.
Just sort of 5mm hardboard. It's just a good base surface. Normally, I work on gator foam board.
Okay.
If anyone's unfamiliar with gator foam, you can get it from art shops. It's polystyrene with a sort of a plastic cover back and front. I use that predominantly when I'm plein air painting because it's very light.
Yeah.
So when I wouldn't want to carry a sheet of hardboard if I was out plein air painting because you walk into locations, it gets heavy. So my outdoor kit is much lighter. It's the gator foam. It's feather light, but very very stiff and firm, perfect for working on. Yeah.
Wonderful. And thanks for all the thank yous in the chat. We still have lots of questions, so if you have time, Ian, do you have time to stay for a bit?
Yes, absolutely.
We do have some logistics that I'm gonna walk us through, and then it's time for the Q&As. And the first question is actually from us to you, and that is, what did you find most inspiring today in the process of painting with Ian? Please write that in the chat, both for us to see, but also for you to remember. What was most inspiring and something that you learned today? Let's jump to, I'm gonna do this very quickly now. So here's an overview of what we've spoken about today. 1, structure, finding those simple shapes and tying them together, creating a focus and creating atmosphere in the approach that Ian has showed us today. And if you've enjoyed watching Ian in this workshop, this was just a taste of the full journey that he has created in the new course at Artefacto, and the course is called Dynamic Street Scenes in Watercolor. And it goes through 3 different paintings in a very organized, structured, step-by-step approach, starting with tonal, focus on the tonal values, and then adding the color and add additional aspects. And here are the final paintings from this course, where you get access to, so you can watch this again and again and again. And our mission is to offer you a learning experience where you just feel that you are empowered to create these kinds of scenes without a sense of overwhelm, so that you feel that sense of clarity and inspiration when you see one of these references. And this is a 24/7 access deal. So the recorded lessons are stored at our platform, so you can log in at any time from wherever you are, as long as you have a device and internet connection. And if you currently have experienced any buffering, that's not the case on the platform, because that's not live streamed. So it's much easier for the internet to keep up at the course platform. And it's also high quality videos. There's a beautiful community that's always supporting each other. So if you are looking for that community, that's also an aspect of this course. We also have the premium plan where you will receive individual feedback from our wonderful curator, who is also a professional artist, and she specializes in teaching watercolor as well. And they will never leave you behind. They're super supportive and will give you that extra encouragement, push, and insight to take you to the next level. There's also the certificate of completion if you choose the premium plan, so that you can prove to the world that you have this education. And we have the two different pricing plans, and these are the prices. The orange prices are the ones that are relevant as long as I keep talking here live and we are still in this live format. Then they will switch to the black prices, and after the launch they will switch to the lighter, even lighter prices. We also have the bonus of Arty coins, which is a virtual currency that you can exchange for products in our special store called Arty Store. And there are a limited number of spots for the premium plan. So if you want that additional support from our curator, I hope you get one of those spots. And if you're looking to not just take a course, but also have this mindset shift when it comes to these subjects, then warmest welcome to join us by scrolling down and clicking the join the course button that's below this screen. And it's an incredible thing that we get to learn from Ian, who usually only educates people on offline workshops. And now we get to do that from the comfort of our own homes, or even from the comfort of our own trains if we want to rewatch the lessons there, or wherever we happen to be. The only thing you need to join and learn online are internet connection, a device, and of course art materials if you want to follow along. So here is the recap. And right now we have these deals. They will of course not be forever. And if you have not paid or joined any of our courses in the past, I know that some people are wondering how that works, how the logistics of that is. And simply when you click the join the course button, you will come here. You can read more or just take a glimpse if you feel that you need some extra information. However, if you do, you will not get the additional price benefit, because they are only now. Whenever you are ready to join the course, you can choose the plan that works for you and fill in your name, your correct email address, and your phone number for WhatsApp, and then click proceed to payment. And when we get to the payment page, you can choose to complement your order if you like. But I'm gonna press no thanks because I only want to learn from Ian. And then when I am ready to purchase, I will press PayPal or by card, depending on what my preferences is, and then fill in those informations. And then when you have filled in and paid, you will get an email with access to the course materials so that you can get started straight away. So this is a course where once you join, you can just do it at any time. You will get access to it in a few minutes. We also do have a guarantee. So if after a couple of lessons, you feel that this is not what you need to reach that next level, then just within a couple of weeks after purchase, write us an email and you will get your money back. So I'm gonna check what your answers were in the chat on this one, what your takeaways were, and something that you wanted to remember. And of course, warmest welcome to join the course. And it's time to take a look at both the chat and some questions.
Okay.
Oh, Evi writes, I have bought the course. It is so inspiration. Wonderful. And Jackie, oh yeah, so one warmest welcome. And we have some comments in the chat. Inspiring. Judy also says, I also bought the premium course and I'm looking forward to it. Mentor writes, you know how to inspire. That's a gift. Thank you so much. Wonderful. And Jamie writes, love seeing Ian create his artist world, that it was better than all the details in the photo. And Lutz writes, from a dull photo to a mystic beauty. So that is some takeaways that we have received today.
Good.
It was lovely. And then we have the possibility to add characters to the image, change the appearance of the background. And Elizabeth's takeaway was simplification. Linda said becoming the artist rather than just seeing realism. And Anna also says simplicity. Elizabeth says seeing how to simplify the scene was fantastic. The magic of a limited palette was surprising, said Pille. And Josefina says a lot of buildings, but you could painting in a beautiful and secure way, thanks. And Ben says figure painting and cars. So lots and lots of takeaways.
Good.
And Carol writes, his whole process was inspiring. So there are so many more comments. I can't read them all. Thank you so much for sharing all of those in the chat. So many comments. Beautiful. And yes, we have a question. How long is the access? And this is lifetime access during this launch. So when you join, you can always go back to this course if you choose to join us. Let's take a look at some of the questions that I have saved up.
Mm-hmm.
And starting with, do you prepare your paper when you work in this size, or do you prepare your paper by pre-wetting it or stretching it or anything like that if you work larger than you did today?
No, not at all. I never stretch paper. That's the first thing I'll say. I would have, it's a personal thing. I know a lot of people like to stretch it to stop it buckling and lifting and what have you. I own the heaviest. I'll go through my paper. It's always rough surface. It's always cotton. It's never wood pulp paper. It's always cotton, either Arches, Saunders, or something similar. Rough surface. It's always 300 GSM, and I don't stretch it.
Okay.
People worry about it buckling, but the way to stop it buckling, and I try and encourage my students not to tape it down. I mean, I taped it down today on 4 sides because obviously it's nice to get a clean edge when you've demoed.
Oh.
Normally when I paint, I do not tape it down, and I never pre-wet it. All I do is put a couple of bits of tape on the top corners and allow the paper just to be flat. Then you'll find you put all the water you like on it, because you haven't locked it down on its 4 sides, it will stretch out. It won't push up in the middle. The only reason watercolor paper pushes up in the middle is if people lock it down on 4 sides, it's then got nowhere to go. It'll push up in the middle. Prevent that. Don't tape it down.
So for your technique, that is not required. So if you want an easy preparation of the paper, meaning no preparation of the paper, your style will work for that person.
It works for me.
Yeah, wonderful. And Dorothy asked in the beginning, does Ian always draw such a detailed sketch before painting? Is that standard for you to have that kind of, somewhat detailed sketch?
Yeah, it's a bit of an illusion, really. I mean, it looks more detailed than it is. You saw how I began by just identifying the 3 masses. Most subjects that I would tackle would have 3 mass shapes, regardless, whether it's trees and fields or whether it's a street. There are always sky, middle distance interest, and foreground. From there, the addition of these cars and figures, and 1 or 2 windows here and the chimney pots and such like, they make it look quite detailed. People often say to me, "Oh God, it looks so detailed," but it actually isn't. It just looks detailed. The reason it reads well is because it's proportionally correct, perspectively correct, and everything's sort of linking up quite nicely. So But questions I'm often asked by students, do you ever paint without a drawing? No, I cannot paint blind. If I can see it and if I've got a structured drawing, however, if I've got a decent structured drawing, I can paint it. I'm always fascinated, and I don't know how people do it. If they've got a piece of paper and they start painting with no reference, like you're either on location or you have a reference photograph and a drawing, then I can paint it. If I can't see it, I can't paint it. It's just a mind thing, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then we had some questions regarding the windows and those dry brushed aspects. One person asked, do you feel that broken lines create energy in a painting? And another person asks, do you believe that broken lines create an energy in a painting? And then another question was, I tend to mess up the windows and doors and make them too large. How do we not fuss about them? What are your answers to these two questions regarding the slightly smaller aspects of the painting?
Okay, yeah, dry brushing. Do they create energy in a painting? Yeah, and the perfect example of dry brushing where it's very desirable is on the legs of figures, because if you think about a figure walking along the street, the legs are moving. So if they're dry brushed, they're less obvious. If you paint legs on figures with two solid legs, as it were, immediately they freeze. If they're indicated with just a dry brush technique, again, it's an example of where the viewer will look at they won't even realize, but you look at that sort of ill-defined, if you want, dry brush technique on the legs, and the figure comes to life. Yeah.
And that's another thing that you also did very consciously in the windows, that you did not paint all of the window squares and filled those borders of the window, so to speak. You didn't fill that with a nice wet wash. You just had one of them being very clear, and the rest were just hinted with some dry brushing.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of where the viewer will get involved. As a viewer to that, where I've indicated it without. The problem with painting these solid little squares, one, you can end up with like repeating shapes, and a repeating shape is always distracting. So by using that dry brush technique and just sort of indicating them, it's a perfect example where the viewer, as the viewer, you convert that to a building. I didn't paint it. You're the one that's interpreting it by just such a limited application of paint on there.
I just want to share this one because this is the one that we have for the Q&A slide. And when we watch this, we know exactly what it means. And then when we watch it with a more analytical lens, through a more analytical lens, it's like blooby, 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 bloob, tree. And then there's like yellow, dark, bitty, 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 bitty. People, doof, 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 doof. And you can see that there's dry brushing because we see the grass in their legs, and we see it's really obvious that you work with illusion, because when you look more closely, this is just a few brush strokes in the entire piece. And these as well, it's like, no, what? We know exactly what they are, but they're just a few dry brushed lines, and not very precise either. So it's definitely a trick, like this illusion trick.
It's an illusion. Yeah. I had a guy come up to me in a gallery where I've got some paintings up, and he said, when I get close to these, he said, they look a mess. He said, when I come back over here, it reads beautifully. How do you do that? And I said, I don't have any idea. I don't know. It just works, doesn't it? How I do it, I don't know really. You just sort of, I don't know. You just pop it down as you see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've learned to see through this lens as well. I guess that is something that takes practice as well, to train that pair of glasses, so to speak. and to see the simplified and see the shapes and see where it's enough to indicate with a dry brush and where you actually need to.
Yeah, it's like you know, uh, you know, it's knowing when to stop. There's always this tendency to want to pick the brush up and do more. I need to do more. Does that make sense? People, or it's, but you have to. It's trying to keep in your mind, as I said at the beginning, when you plan your composition, you're at the pencil stage. You've got to plan what am I actually painting here. And I knew right from the beginning what I was painting. I drew a circle around, if you remember, that lower quarter of the picture, just to remind myself that's what I'm painting there. And the problem with like when you're beginning the process of trying to get hold of this concept, the first thing you paint generally in a painting is the background. So you've done your sky, you put your foreground, and then the first structural thing you paint is those background buildings. And because it's the first thing people paint, they overdo it. They get too involved in it. Because at that point, you may have forgotten, well, what I'm actually painting is this area here. So this is where it takes time, it takes repeating the process, it takes making mistakes, realizing at the end, oh, I got overly involved in the background, I shouldn't have done that. And then the next one you do, you just sort of think, well, last time I did this, you've got to do things wrong to get things right, really. So I've done it 1,000 times where I've maybe got involved in certain areas, but I'm so used to it now that I think, well, no, that's it's a background. It's got to be done. It's representational artwork, but I know I don't really. I've got to diminish the details in certain areas, and you got to know what you need a plan really, and you've just got to somehow. It's just do it. And I said at the beginning, paint without fear. Don't worry about ruining it. It doesn't matter. You will only learn from mistakes, and too many people fall into a good way of thinking about it. I've heard, people fall into comfort zones. They'll paint certain subjects because they can do it, and they're really lovely.
And also, when you are good at something, and you're like, "Oh, I'm at this level now."
Yeah.
Painting a different subject, and you're all of a sudden a beginner.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good for the ego or for the self-image.
I know why people do that, because they get a subject and they paint it, and then people look at it and they go, wow, that's lovely. What you don't want is to paint something that looks horrible, and somebody go, oh my God, I don't really know if it, so everyone's like worried about, acclamation or, having coverage. That's where it's so important. Everything else aside, if you want to advance, you've got to be prepared to ruin a few, to make the mistakes. Because if you stay in comfort zones, and I always say this to people, if you're going to stay around just doing nothing but painting trees and fields or something, because you've learned a way of doing it and that you can make them work and they look nice. The trouble is with comfort zones, nothing grows in a comfort zone. So if you really do want to develop, I can remember right at the beginning when I started, and I used to hear people say, like, oh, I can't do this, I can't do that. And I was bewildered by that. I couldn't understand why people say, oh, I can't do figures, I can't do cars, I can't do that. And I think, well, I mean, I'm a street painter, I'm a plein air painter, landscape, whatever it is, and all this kind of stuff, both. And I don't tend to paint things like sort of bowls of fruit or flowers. But if I wanted to, I could do it. And why can I do it? Not because I can paint bowls of fruit or I can paint a vase of flowers. It's not because I'm trying to. I can do it because I know what the rules of painting are. I know what tone value is. I know what a defined focal point is. I know edge control. I know temperature. So it's irrelevant whether it's a bowl of flowers or this street that I'm painting today. The same techniques would be used all the way through. The very same techniques. There's no difference in the technique at all, or the rules. I think if you really do want to take on things that you don't feel so comfortable with. And
Ooh, we have one question that I read, like, we have spent a lot of time together, so we will wrap up very shortly. So I actually think this is the final question. I know we didn't get through all of your questions. I still hope you had a wonderful time and learned a lot. The final question is from Ari. The question is, any tips on how to create the cast shadows that are not in the reference photo? Thank you so much, Ian and Artefacto. So yeah, there was this wow, what? When you created all of these cast shadows just by apparently having understood the rules of cast shadows so that you can apply them without having a sunny day and without needing the light and the shadows to be there on the reference photo. You just know the logic and place them there, and it looks beautiful and it creates a completely different weather and so much more depth and interest. Is it possible to even say something about that in a minute?
all right, a couple of minutes. Why? It's covering the bottom left-hand corner of the image. And it's a sort of tried and tested routine that's been used, or technique that's been used for centuries, isn't it? If you lock down the bottom left-hand or right-hand corner with a dark shadow like that, it pushes the viewer into the lighter area. It's what I said about opposites. You need conflict, and if you want to create light, you need to paint dark.
And how do we, like, the more specific part of the question is, how do we place them correctly in a way that is logical and doesn't just look like we had a lot of dark color painted in the wrong places?
Oh, well, they need to be. I tend to, with shadows, it's hopefully we're trying to create a warm day. So they need to be transparent. So you really want transparent colors. Up the temperature. So if you use transparent, like ultramarine blue, make sure you put some burnt sienna or some warmer value into it that's sort of transparent. Keep the mix of value, the sort of tone value you want it, but it needs to be sort of fluid enough to create the clarity of the shadow. I use shadows to link sometimes. I said about connection. It's a very good idea. You need to connect shapes within your image. Shadows are the perfect sort of thing to create connection with your shapes. You can sometimes use a shadow off the bottom of the figure to run across the street, or the shadow cast off of a street lamp all the way across the street to connect something on the opposite side of the street with something on this side of the street. So they're a great way, and you've just got to figure out where your direction of light's coming from, and anything that faces away from it, you can cast into shadow and try and connect those shadows as they go across the image. But it's basically a case of darkening up the foreground. It will push the viewer further into the painting, and it creates that sense of like sunlight.
Yeah. Absolutely. It was fascinating to watch this not sunlighty image just become full of sunlight. Not because you painted any more light or any more warmth in the lighter parts or any yellows more than you had already. You just created shadows, and all of a sudden it was a sunny day.
When sunny day, yeah.
Yeah, very fascinating to see.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing this. It's time to wrap up and let people use this inspiration in their lives. And if you have already joined us, welcome. And if you want to join us, welcome to do so. And huge thanks to everyone who was part of this and created a beautiful environment of focus. And just spending this time together has been beautiful. And thank you so much, Ian, for sharing your expertise so generously with us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for hosting, and thank you very much to everyone who took the time to watch. I'm very grateful. It's a great honour to have the opportunity to do this, and I very much enjoyed it. I just
so happy to
helpful to people. Let's love watercolor.
Yes, let's celebrate making mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. Celebrate mistakes.
Thank you so much.